Ian,
Sir.
this has been a weird topic that I first heard about in the summer of 2017, where it was almost comical in a sense about, all right, we got this Activision Atari game from like fucking 35 years ago,
Dragster.
where you have a record. It's a short game. If you ever played the game, it's a drag race and it's short. It should be over in less than 10 seconds. The game.
Yep.
I mean, that's all it is. So it's technically a pretty sound game for what it is.
And it's fun. I've played it. Yeah.
You got to watch your clutch. You shift into different gears, and you can race a second player. So there was another word, kerfuffle again, about I think it was the record. It's the Guinness World Record's longest running video game record.
Right. Exactly.
Which was for Dragster, set by Todd Rogers at 5.51 seconds. So last summer, you had little murmurings about people trying to dispute this, saying, well, we don't know if it's technically possible to garner a score that low or a time that low. And this has been even certified in Guinness Book of World Records as this is, and even certified by Activision that this is a world record for this.
Right. I mean, a lot of these older games, and probably a lot of newer games too, depending on which ones you're playing, there is an absolute score you can get. There's only so far you can get.
Well, for a time game like this,
yes,
that would make perfect sense.
Exactly.
This isn't necessarily a high score where you can keep going forever, like Pac-Man, until you lose lives.
There is a perfect score for Pac-Man too.
Sure, but you see what I'm saying, though.
Yes.
But for a timed game, there's only as low as you can possibly go. So when you hear about these old scores and old records, you have to think about back in the day. How did they verify them?
Usually Polaroids. Like if you read the back of Atari manuals, especially Activision, it specifically states Polaroid.
But you have to think about who was involved with verifying them and keeping the records. So this was input into Twin Galaxies for so long, which was the keeper of the flame, so to speak, of the original, I guess professional gaming scores. The whole famous King of Con thing with Billy Mitchell and all that. This is what they're known for, Twin Galaxies. It's a name synonymous with video game records, especially in the classic gaming age. So what's interesting, though, is that when this originally came up in July, when I first heard about it, I just thought it was kind of curious. There wasn't much movement. But it seemed the game gained steam over months and months and months. People on Twin Galaxies were then publicly disputing it because you can do that on Twin Galaxies. It used to be only, I think, officially referees would decide. Now it's a peer review system of scores, and that happened with the buyout in 2014. I think they changed it then, or gradually changed it. I'm not totally familiar, but they did change how it worked. So this record by Todd Rogers came under dispute because there was a speedrunner named OmniGamer that went and basically with the tool assist try to go frame by frame to see what is actually the lowest possible time for Dragster. And guess what? It wasn't 5.51. It was 5.57 was the lowest he could get.
Right.
So at that point, it became, okay, something might at least be going on here, and let's investigate further. But it seemed at the time, Twin Galaxies didn't care originally, the summer of last year, or they ignored it, which I thought was curious. They didn't really respond right away. So then I think more and more people started looking into this, like, oh, what's going on? What's going on with this?
Right. This is curious. What I also thought was interesting was, when the speedrunner started using a tool-assisted speedrun to try to, break 5.57, I believe it was Todd Rogers who responded with, there's, multiple ways you can play the game in a tool-assisted speed, with tools, it's not going to, account for all the ways you can play it, but no, it is. I mean, a tool-assisted speedrun is designed to find the quickest way from A to B.
Sure.
So,
it's impossible for a human to do better than a tool-assisted run.
Right.
Because they're looking at every scenario, every frame of the way, and calculating out the different possibilities at that point in time.
Right. It's designed to take into account all the potential ways you could do this.
Sure. And for a game like Dragster, there's a much more finite number of choices because when you shift to a different gear and things of that nature, so you can play out all the different scenarios a lot easier.
Correct.
And I think OmniGainer did a whole database about, well, if you shift at this point in time, this is where you'll get this point in time. So there's actually if a finite number of choices in a game like this to get to that lower score. It's actually not infinite. It can become looking like infinite when you stretch it out, but you're still limited. You're limited to what you can possibly do with this. So this whole story has taken some twists and turns about. There was an article put out in Twin Galaxies that was very strange. I think it was like January 23rd that pointed out the controversy, but then kind of defended Todd Rogers, and they even quoted David Crane, who said in his opinion he thinks Todd Rogers actually got the 5.51. So my issue with that, though, is that if Twin Galaxies is the keeper of these scores, they shouldn't be weighing in on them or trying to persuade or move the public opinion, especially by going and getting David Crane, who, for all intents and purposes, he's like, yeah, why should I disbelieve this guy? Maybe he probably did it back then. It's not a big deal. So it's kind of using his star power, so to speak, to their own advantage, which I think is kind of slimy.
Yeah.
The more I think about it.
But the other thing is, I met David Crane briefly, a nice guy, but
very nice guy.
My position is very simple. The high scores published by Activision in the 1980s were authenticated using the established methods at the time by the governing authority at the time. I have no doubts then or now that Todd Rogers achieved the scores attributed to him, provided the necessary corroborating evidence to support those scores, and earned the right to be named world champion by the accepted validating authority. Sorry that I can't provide anything more concrete than my opinion. At the time, the validating methods at the time were extremely primitive. And the original Polaroid no longer exists, and everyone said that it was smudged right where the evidence necessary,
the score or the time,
would really be necessary. Everyone says that it was, smudged over the last digit, and a 4 smudged properly is going to look like a 1. I mean, look at a numeral 1 and look at a numeral 4. You smudge that right, it's gonna look.
But Activision claimed back then they could do a 5.54, but no one now could even do it.
Activision claims he could do a 5.54. Rogers is stating the record is 5.51.
Yes.
Even if you could do a 5.54 in the game counts in 0.3s or 0.03s.
300ths of a second.
That's one tick better technically than what anyone else has achieved, even though other people have. There was 2 other people who claimed it but never really provided evidence. That's one tick better than what everyone else claims is the maximum, but still one tick away from what Todd Rogers is claiming is his best score.
Sure.
So, I mean, that still doesn't prove anything.
Yeah. Again, these are all records from the early 80s, and when you have this new entity rising up in order to capture, at the time, there was no such thing as professional gaming, really. I mean, it was just starting to come about. So you had this new entity saying, we're going to be the ones that are going to keep all these scores and do it. You don't know how that's going to shape out. Who's going to join that organization in the 80s? If it's going to be clean, what accountability is there back then? And those are questions that are coming out now. And for something like this, where, okay, you can't prove, there's no evidence of a 5.51 score. Now, what does that call into question? Does it just call into question his other scores, which we'll get into, or does it call into question a league of other scores from back then too?
I mean, it very well could.
And I think that's maybe why they were afraid to move on this originally.
Yes.
Because now the integrity of Twin Galaxies, I believe, is called into question.
Oh, so do I. And I think a lot of it was, I mean, let's look at it this way. A lot of these records that they're talking about, especially the ones like that Todd Rogers held, and we'll get into this. His record was debunked, expunged, and all of his other records were cleared out, and we'll get into why shortly. But I don't think anyone realized that this was going to be taken this seriously in the future. I think that this was kind of an old boys club.
Absolutely.
In the back.
Yeah.
Definitely an old boys
It's
club.
a clique.
It was a clique. I think they all looked out for each other's backs.
Mm-hmm.
And let's not forget that in the late 70s, early 80s, especially if you look into the arcade scene, it wasn't exactly... It was seedy. I mean, we talk about that on the video game years. You know, arcades became more family friendly in the mid to, late 80s, but in the late 70s and the early 80s, they weren't. It was a place where, teenagers and, young adults got together, and like I said, this was a boys club, and Todd Rogers was part of Twin Galaxies.
That's the strange part about it. You have a situation where Todd Rogers, who was publicly like one of the earliest sort of rock stars of the arcade gaming scene. He's in magazines. He's publicly recognized.
He's being invited out to party with the members of Activision.
Sure. So you have maybe around him, you have this. See, I wasn't around then, meaning a little younger. But maybe you have others glomming on, and maybe others say, "Oh, I want to be like that too." We can all get world records, and arcade gaming was coming the hottest thing ever in the early '80s. So maybe that there was this maelstrom of I don't want to say dishonesty, but getting caught up in this, and then if we fudge a score, who cares? Who's really gonna know? Who's gonna check it? There's no one to check it. We're the people. We hold it. No one else does. There's no accountability. There's no higher. We're the highest Twin Galaxies. There's no one above us.
Right. We're the powers that be.
Yeah. So we can control our own destiny. But I think, though, is that once that happens, it takes a long time for that power to be taken away from the original guard.
Yes.
The old guard 35 years ago. And when you have, was it Jace Hall bought it in 2014, maybe he didn't know, or the other people that helped now didn't know the lengths of the bad or incorrect records from 35 years ago. Because who the fuck would fake some of these or want to defraud about Dragster
I mean,
on the 2600?
I feel like with the modern verification record methods and stuff, I have a feeling Twin Galaxies now, I feel like the records are probably something for modern games, modern records set. They're probably fine. But yes,
because there's all evidence of them.
Right.
Now.
But any record that was set without verifiable evidence that we can still look back on, and a lot of those early records, that may not have been beat, I feel, you have to take them with a grain of salt. You have to look at them in question now. Absolutely.
Because this isn't, to me, this is at least in the realm of like not possibility in terms of, well, we know it's impossible. But maybe at the time they thought, well, 5.51 was possible. It's only 300ths of a second less than what Activision did. So, this is a miracle guy. You know what I mean?
Or this seems like a reasonable fudge that we can get away with.
But when you start to look at some of these other scores from Todd Rogers, you're like, really? No one questioned this at all. Really? Everyone just took this guy as not just a gaming god, a literal god for performing, above and beyond what everyone else did.
What's the Intellivision Donkey Kong score? Or
was
Atari?
Was like 1 million? Where is it?
It's like double. I think the Centipede one is like double what the other record was.
When you look at some of these scores from Todd Rogers that they're getting rid of, and I wish I had them all in front of me right now, but they are insane.
Some were double the second place score.
Some were 10 times.
Some
no one could come close.
Some ended in numerals, like some would end in like 60 or 70 when the game only ever scored in 50 or 0. So it would be impossible for that score to ever be scored. And even then, I mean, people dragged their feet on
barnstorming,
expunging this.
Barnstorming, it was removed even before all this. It was discovered it was impossible to achieve even when all the obstacles were removed. So in barnstorming, you're playing ultra speed when you go up and down, right?
Yeah.
So I guess they must have went in an emulator and just removed all the barns and obstacles and said, okay, we'll just run it straight and see what happens. And the score was still impossible. So they removed that. At that point, wouldn't it tell you that something's fucking fishy with this guy's scores?
Yeah.
And then go back and look at all of them? Why would you then protect the other scores. I know there was that famous case, not famous, but there was that one of the GoldenEye speed runs. They discovered the guy was cheating on one of them because I remember at the beginning of the cutscene, like there was a weapon or something in his hand that shouldn't have been there. So they said, okay, this was a cheat.
Gotcha.
So even if some of the other ones were, even if some of the other records were legit, they said, fuck them, they're all wiped, and that's it. And that takes care of it.
Right.
They should have done that immediately before it even got to this point, and then said, okay.
Yeah, I mean, one cheat should, honestly, and that should amount to immediate disqualification if you want.
Zero tolerance.
If you want to try to preserve the integrity of anything that you stand for, in this case, the high scores, you need to eliminate that stuff in the bud and then immediately kind of look into everything else. Go through your other records. Do you have the actual proof for this? No? Eliminate it.
Let's see. According to this article, his NES Donkey Kong score was eliminated because there's no evidence they could find for it. He had high scores in skiing, Stampede, Grand Prix. Oh, yeah. He had a 65 million point score in Centipede.
Yeah, no.
65 million. What are you playing for 3 weeks straight?
Yeah.
Like how are you getting that high up? When you looked at them, because they're now all gone from Twin Galaxies, but there was one, I wish I knew which one. I remember when I was looking, there was one that I think it was one of the Donkey Kong ones, maybe it was the Intellivision one or whatever, where it was the second place was by a factor of not even 2 or 3, it was like a factor of like 100 times less. Like it wasn't even, it didn't seem
really?
feasible.
I thought it was just double, but still.
There was one that didn't look feasible at the time. Maybe I'm getting it wrong, but they didn't pass the smell test when you looked at them.
Well, and if I'm not mistaken, it was because he was allowed to input some of these records and no one just ever double checked it.
Well, that sounds good.
Or he knew someone who was inputting records.
Oh, like a convicted pedophile.
Oh, right.
Forgot to mention that.
Whoops. Yeah, forgot all about that one.
Yeah. Not even alleged, convicted.
Actually, I didn't forget about that. We were just waiting to drop that.
Yeah, forgot about that. Very strange situation. I think the public pressure got Twin Galaxies to finally say, okay, let's do this. They even asked Ben Heck to get involved. They had Todd Rogers and Ben Heck do it. Ben Heck basically duplicated what OmniGamer did with his own hardware setup and had Todd Rogers awkwardly on film. Did you see these?
No.
You didn't see that?
No. I mean, that's cringeworthy. I don't know.
So all this happened, and this has all happened in the past like 5 weeks. So they have.
I kept up on the news. I did not watch the Ben Heck video. I really should.
Yeah, I think Jace Hall got in touch with Ben Heck and said, "This is wouldn't you be interested in doing this?" And at first, I think Ben didn't care until he's like, "Oh, I can build a hardware setup to try to do this and still input it on the computer." But
of course, as soon as Ben can build something, he's gonna want to do it.
but there was a video put out by Apollo Legends that only on January 23rd. It already has 1.5 million views and calls him the biggest cheater in gaming history. And subtitle 1,700 plus scores with no evidence. So if it's only 1,700, that's insane. All I know is that when I saw the barnstorming one, and then the Donkey Kong one,
the Centipede one was,
and the Centipede one, which is like. Oh yeah, and then on the video you can see the picture of the fake stain on the picture of barnstorming, where like it's.
Oh, it's Okay, it was barnstorming that had the stain, not Dragster.
Yeah.
My bad.
So okay, but what's disheartening though is I really hope, but my feeling is that Twin Galaxies sort of played in on this drama to get exposure. Because before this, have you thought about Twin Galaxies at all?
I actually have more than you might think, but I mean,
most people
probably not. No.
So I think they try to capitalize on it.
Sure.
And I think this hurts them though, because they should have just squashed it right away and said, okay, we're suspending him at least until we investigate all of it, instead of letting it get to this point.
This is one of those cases where not all publicity is good publicity at all.
Oh, here it is. It was 15 million on the Intellivision version of Donkey Kong.
Okay.
And the second place wasn't even like 1 million.
I think it was like 500 something.
So
or I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, it was really low.
Oh yeah, here, the second place was under 1 million. So a factor of 15 times to get to that point.
Holy shit.
So at that point, isn't it like, okay, are you the only one playing this game, or is something going on? So this, to me, is extremely damaging for Twin Galaxies, because Yeah. Oh yeah. Here it is. Yeah. 15 million. Second place, 389,000.
389,000. Okay, so I wasn't even right with 500,000.
Centipede, 65 million. Second place, 58,000. So I said a factor of 100. I was off. It's way more than 100. It's fucking way more than a factor of 100.
Oh man.
And a perfect 65 million. So the date verified was 2001 for that. So, but this is fucking bizarre. This whole thing is bizarre. This is for, and I hate to say it, and not to get too personal with some of these personalities involved. You want to hold on to former glory of shit you did when you were a teenager in the early 80s. Okay, that's fine. But to go to the lengths to try to perpetuate lies and deception and fraud, you're fucking sad at that point.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Do something better with your fucking life.
You are a sad soul at that point.
Join a band. Make a band.
I'm sorry you're in your 50s and the highlight of your life was a fucking video game score in 1981. Do something else. Try to do something else.
Right.
And not defraud the public over something that really is stupid, but at the end when you're found out, makes you look like a piece of trash.
Yeah.
And I think more scores from maybe other big people in the industry, like maybe Billy Mitchell, will eventually be looked at because of this. People are going to go back and scrutinize a bunch of this shit now.
Right. And in sadly, a bunch of legitimate scores from people who really did get them and put lots of time and effort into it will probably come under question, and hopefully they won't be reversed. But this could open up
can of worms. It's a can of worms.
Yeah. And, there are probably a lot of it. Like I said, a lot of these old 80s scores probably need to be looked into again. And it's a shame because there are probably lots of valid ones. But because they let this go for so long, unfortunately, it's all in question.
And now you have to do this now. Because now if the person now, these guys are like in their 50s now or even 60s. If they don't have the ability to go back and do it, they at least have to find someone else that can to verify that this was even possible.
Yeah.
At least go that far.
Right,
if you got 65 million, can someone get close to that nowadays? That's an expert.
Right, they need to find someone like a tool assisted speedrunner
to get that close
to prove that it can be done.
And if not, it's thrown out.
Because obviously, a lot of these people in their 50s now don't have the same reflexes. Sure. But there needs to be some way to show that it can at least be done. 65
million in Intellivision.com. First of all, why would you put yourself through that? But second of all, it's just
such a bad version.
It's fucking ridiculous. So I'm glad that this boys club clique for over 30 years is finally getting looked at.
Yeah, me too.
With nefarious fucking characters. Yeah. Some convicted pedophiles, by the way, which that's not even alleged. They're convicted pedophiles, but that's a whole other weird fucking disgusting issue.
But yeah, one.
That just shows you the type of character maybe that were involved with these.
I mean, that's awful. I just want to make sure we're not.
The one that we know about that's convicted, yes.
Okay.
But I thought there was a second one that I read about, but.
Oh, well, if that's the case, that's.
Allegedly, to save us. But anyway. All right. Well, this is some weird drama with Todd Rogers. You look like you got to take a piss right now.
Something like that. So give me a minute here.